What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is Legitical Response, and here we go, folks, knocking out some more corporate press misinformation brought to you exclusively by Pfizer. That is right. Here we go. We got some more Associated Press garbage coming out. Check this out, y'all. Harris and Trump offer worlds apart contrasts on top issues in presidential race. This thing is filled with so much misinformation, but it's okay, folks. I brought the receipts. Let's get into it. Vice President Kamala Harris has replaced President Joe Biden atop the presidential ticket, but his finish the job campaign mantra can still largely apply to her top policy goals. She's promising to continue a lot of what Biden was doing during the last 4 years if she's elected to 4 of her own years. Now, see, you gotta love this. The corporate press and, Karine Jean-Pierre, we saw that video clip the other day of Karine Jean-Pierre, could have took the opportunity to distance Kamala Harris from the Biden administration, but no, it's the Biden-Harris administration. They're wanting you to put these two together. So let's remember, folks, the last 4 years versus the 4 years before that. But what they should be doing is trying to distance Kamala Harris from Bidenomics. That's the main hang-up that we have going on with Biden and Harris, right? Because she needs to distance herself from that because, she's talking about on day one, we're going to do this and blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what? Like it's been said, day one was a long time ago, 3.5 years ago. So what are you talking about, Kamala Harris? Let's keep going. President Donald Trump, for his part, is itching to get back to the White House and accomplish what he didn't during his first term. Since Biden stepped down last month, the vice president has announced few major policy proposals beyond a new push to prevent price gouging by food producers and grocers and plans to cut taxes for families, attempting to bring down home buying and rental prices and reduce medical debt. Now, that's funny, and we discussed all of these, talking about price gouging. Well, you can't really do that. That's called price fixing. She would have to actually dictate the price of groceries. And once you start dictating prices, everything else needs to fall in line because stuff's going to skyrocket. You're going to create shortages. And that's bad economics 101. That's just simple. You can't do that. And since when have you ever heard and actually seen it put into practice, Democrats lowering taxes? Yeah, I don't know about that one. Harris also used a recent rally in Las Vegas where the economy runs on the hospitality industry to call for ending taxes on tips paid to restaurant, hotel, and other service employees. That came more than a month after Trump used his own Las Vegas rally to promise the same on tips. Here we go. Once again, we've got the Associated Press. They love to do it. They're going to go ahead and list out a bunch of different policy positions and then say, well, this is what Harris is doing and this is what Trump is doing. Now, they've done this for Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and we covered that one a little while back. And once again, it's the same misinformation they're giving out. So once again, I'm going to put out another video about it and correct the misinformation. Here we go, folks. Abortion. Harris, the vice president, has called on Congress to pass legislation guaranteeing the federal law abortion access a right. That's a lie. It's never been a right to murder another human being. I'm sorry. A right that stood for nearly 50 years before being overturned by the Supreme Court. Like Biden, Harris has criticized bans on abortion in Republican-controlled states and promised as president to block any potential nationwide ban should one clear a future GOP-run Congress. Harris was the Democrats' most visible champion of abortion rights, even while Biden was still in the race. She has promoted the administration's efforts short of federal law, including steps to protect women who travel to obtain abortions and limit how law enforcement collects medical records. Now, this is something that I want to get into. I talked about a little bit yesterday that if the Democrats truly want to have multiculturalism going on in this country, you have to have state independence. You have to have autonomous states making their own laws, can be vastly different from each other because if you're going to have multiculturalism, you've got to have multiculturalism. You can't have federal laws that cover everybody, right? Some people are sickened by abortion, as a matter of fact. These people don't like it. They consider it murder. And the authoritarian left is trying to force abortions upon these people. Not saying that they would have to get them, just saying that they would have to live with knowing that their neighbors have the ability to be able to kill their children whenever the hell they want. It's insane. This is personally why I think the Trump plan is the better way to go. You know, when he come out and said this, I'm staunchly against abortion. I don't think it's right. I don't like all the emotional arguments coming from the Democrats talking about, oh, it's a woman's right to choose and all this garbage. I'm sorry. There were several choices made to get to that point. So you already made that choice, by the way. Now, I'm a person of compromise. I've said this before in the past. That, look, you want to put some kind of abortion out there? I'm willing to compromise with up to like 12 weeks. Right? I think that is fair. I think that is plenty fair. If you want to make that federal, sure, then all these people that want to kill their children, go right ahead. You have 3 months to do it. 3 whole months. If you can't decide in that amount of time, then I'm sorry. It's outright murder. It is outright murder at that point. The former president often brags about appointing the Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade, ending the constitutional right to an abortion. It's not a constitutional right. It never was a constitutional right. I am sorry. That was a Supreme Court decision that was never codified into law. After dodging questions about when pregnancy he believes the procedure should be restricted, Trump announced last spring that decisions on access and cutoffs should be left to the states. Now, once again, this is more disinformation because Trump has said several times that he would agree with a 16-week ban. That would be fine. You get 4 months, which I don't agree with that. I think that's too much time. I mean, you're halfway through the pregnancy at that point. But if you're going to state facts, Associated Press, at least get the facts right. But they only get some of the facts right. He said he would not sign a national abortion ban into law, but he's declined to say whether he would try to limit access to the abortion pill mifepristone. He told Time magazine that it should also be left to the states to determine whether to prosecute women for abortions or to monitor their pregnancies. Like anybody's going to monitor somebody's pregnancy. That's an insane, ridiculous talking point from the Democrats, by the way. Nobody is going to monitor pregnancies. That's ridiculous. Now, here we go with climate change. Harris, as a senator from California, the vice president, was an early sponsor of the Green New Deal, a sweeping series of proposals meant to swiftly move the U.S. to fully green energy that is championed by the Democratic Party's most progressive wing. Harris also said during her short-lived 2020 presidential campaign that she opposed offshore drilling for oil and hydraulic fracturing or fracking. But during her 3.5 years as vice president, Harris has adopted more moderate positions, focusing instead on implementing the climate provisions of the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act, which, by the way, I will state for the record, had nothing to do with inflation and had everything to do with raising taxes, this green garbage that they're coming out with, and actually increasing government spending, because that's exactly what it done. They're hiring 80,000 new IRS agents, for crying out loud. You got to pay all these people a salary. They've got to have workspace, so they're going to have to build offices and all of this crap, right? The Inflation Reduction Act actually makes more inflation, as a matter of fact. Because government spending leads to inflation, just outright. It's not the total cause for inflation, but when you're spending in a $1.7 trillion deficit, that is, and we're adding $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days or something like that. It's getting outright insane, and something needs to change. You're going to break the camel. The back of the camel is going to bust, and the economy, the bottom is going to freaking fall out. These people don't seem to get that. They think we can just keep on spending and keep on spending in a deficit, and nothing bad is going to happen. Well, we could just print more money. Yeah, and devalue the money, and create even more of an economic crisis than we already have, right? We're teetering on the edge of recession here. And if we happen to teeter over, yeah, it's going to go down, and it's going to go down fast. We already saw a stock market crash the other day, like I think a week ago. And it rebounded slightly, but people lost millions on that deal. Possibly billions. But they don't seem to understand that. And they're out here preaching, talking about price gouging and all this garbage. What they really mean is price controls. Because that's what that is. Because nobody is out here price gouging. I mean, put two and two together. Biden and Harris both, they get out there and constantly talk about the greedy corporations raising prices. And then they're going to come in with some price gouging legislation proposals. Yeah, hang on. I see what's going on here. I see it's communism, right? It's not just greedy corporate raising the prices on everything. It's inflation because the government is spending way too much money. That provided nearly $375 billion for things like financial incentives for electric cars, clean energy projects. The Biden administration has also enlisted more than 20,000 young people in a National Climate Corps, a Peace Corps-like program to promote conservation through tasks such as weatherizing homes and repairing wetlands. Despite that, it's unlikely that the U.S. will be on track to meet Biden's goals of cutting greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030, a benchmark that Harris hasn't talked about in the early part of her own White House bid. Trump. His mantra for one of his top policy priorities, drill baby drill. Trump, who in the past cast climate change as a hoax and harbors a particular disdain for wind power because it's garbage, says it's his goal for the U.S. to have the cheapest energy and electricity in the world. He'd increase oil drilling on public lands, offer tax breaks to oil and gas and coal producers, speed the approval of natural gas pipelines, and roll back the Biden administration's aggressive efforts to get people to switch to electric cars, which he argues have a place but shouldn't be forced on consumers. And he's right about that. That is exactly what the Biden administration is doing. He's already forced the government to buy nothing but electric vehicles. Forced the government to do that, whether it's a good idea or not. He has also pledged to re-exit the Paris Climate Accords, end wind subsidies, and eliminate regulations imposed and proposed by Biden administration targeting energy inefficient kinds of light bulbs, stoves, dishwashers, and shower heads. And that is something that we never really get into a whole lot. The dishwashers and the appliances, light bulbs, all this garbage, a lot of the regulations. This is why Gen Z, speaking of, if you're Gen Z and you're watching this video, this is part of the reason you can't afford a house. You can't afford rent because they have to be built to a certain code. A lot of these apartments, buildings, houses, all that garb has to be built to a certain code. Biden's energy efficient garbage regulations that he's putting on these houses is raising the costs to an exorbitant rate to where nobody can afford it. Nobody can afford it. Now, that's not the only reason housing has gone up. We are in a demand right now. We need more housing. We desperately need more housing because of all these criminal aliens that are coming in. That's another reason. But all these regulations around building houses and all this green energy crap, right? Like wind farms are garbage. We should end government subsidies on wind farms. They're junk. Like the wind isn't always blowing enough to turn those turbines. I'm sorry. That's just how it is. Solar is okay for certain instances, but it's not a good replacement for coal, for crying out loud, or for nuclear energy. Why don't they subsidize nuclear power plants? This blows my mind as to why people don't want to build nuclear power plants. We could be the leading in energy. We could have the cheapest energy on the planet if we built more nuclear power plants. They're cheap and they're clean. They're efficient. They're the most efficient, by the way. But nobody wants to do them because, oh, nuclear disaster. I'm sorry. That risk is very minimal. Very minimal. But, you know, you can't get these people to see logic, for crying out loud. Here we go, folks. This is the good one. Democracy and the rule of law. Harris, like Biden, has decried Trump as a threat to the nation's democracy. But in attacking her opponent, the vice president has leaned more heavily into her personal background as a prosecutor and contrasted that with Trump being found guilty of 34 felony counts in the New York hush money case and in being found liable for fraudulent business practices and sexual abuse in civil court. And remind you, all those cases were BS. Outright, just BS. We covered all those cases. If you haven't seen those videos, go check them out. I debunk all of these and prove pretty much outright that he should have never been brought to trial for any of these. None of them. The vice president has also talked less frequently than Biden did about Trump's denial that he lost the 2020 presidential election and his spurring on the January 6, 2021 assault on the Capitol.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order.
When she's interrupted during rallies with supporters lock him up chants directed at Trump, Harris responds that the courts can handle that and our job is to beat him in November. Like, just insanity right there, right? Like, he didn't spur on January 6th. I'm sorry. He called for a rally for a peaceful protest. He said be peaceful. We saw the video. We know the facts here. But the corporate press is just lying. And once again, this is the Kamala Harris section of this, right? And they're still, Trump deranged. Wait till we get to the Trump section. Trump. Here they go, just rehashing old stuff that they just told you about, by the way. After refusing to accept his loss to Biden in 2020, Trump hasn't committed to accepting the results this time.
Will you pledge tonight that once all legal challenges have been exhausted, that you will accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins, and you will say right now that political violence in any form is unacceptable?
Well, I shouldn't have to say that, but of course I believe that. It's totally unacceptable. And if you would see my statements that I made on Twitter at the time, and also my statement that I made in the Rose Garden, you would say it's one of the strongest statements you've ever seen. In addition to the speech I made in front of, I believe, the largest crowd I've ever spoken to, and I will tell you, nobody ever talks about that. They talk about a relatively small number of people that went to the Capitol, and in many cases were ushered in by the police. And as Nancy Pelosi said, it was her responsibility, not mine. She said that loud and clear. But the answer is, if the election is fair, free, and I want that more than anybody. And I'll tell you something. I wish he was a great president, because I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be at one of my many places enjoying myself. I wouldn't be under indictment because I wouldn't have been his political opponent, because he indicted me because I was his opponent. I wish he was a great president. I would rather have that. I wouldn't be here. I don't mind being here. But the only reason I'm here is he's so bad as a president that I'm going to make America great again.
He's repeatedly promised to pardon the January 6th defendants jailed for assaulting police officers and other crimes during the attack on the Capitol. Lies. Once again, outright lies. He has said in the past that any of the peaceful people, that he is going to pardon these people. Not all of them. Anybody that was violent. No, you deserve that because you shouldn't have got violent, dumbass. He vows to overhaul the Justice Department and FBI from the ground up, aggrieved by criminal charges the department has brought against him. Yes, they are very corrupt. Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Associated Press. He also promises to deploy National Guard to cities such as Chicago that are struggling with violent crime. Is that supposed to be a bad thing? No. And in response to protests, and has also vowed to appoint a special prosecutor to go after Biden. Now, once again, lies. He has never said that. He has never said he was going to appoint a special prosecutor to go after Biden. He said he would have every right to go after these people, but he didn't name anybody specifically. But he also said that he wasn't going to do that his retribution was going to be success. So get it right, corporate press. Federal government Harris. Like Biden, Harris has campaigned against Project 2025, a plan authored by leading conservatives to move as swiftly as possible to dramatically remake the federal government and to push it to the right if Trump wins back the White House. She is also part of an administration that is already taking steps to make it harder for any mass firings of civil servants to occur. In April, the Office of Personnel Management issued a new rule that would ban federal workers from being reclassified as political appointees or other at-will employees, thus making them easier to dismiss. That was in response to Schedule F, a 2020 executive order from Trump that reclassified tens of thousands of federal workers to make firing them easier. Notice that had nothing to do with Kamala Harris, really. Had everything to do with Biden and Trump. Had nothing to do with what Kamala Harris is actually going to do. And these people, they're constantly trying to paint firing a bunch of bureaucrats as a bad thing. Let me know down in the comments. Do you think that's a bad thing? Getting rid of bureaucrats, right? The government has expanded its bureaucracy in the last 3.5 years by 40%. Yes, that's an insane statistic, by the way. Trump. And here we go, once again, rehashing what they just told you. The former president has sought to distance himself from Project 2025 despite his close ties to many of its key architects. He has nonetheless vowed an overhaul of the federal bureaucracy, which he has long blamed for blocking his first-term agenda, saying, "I will totally obliterate the deep state." The former president plans to reissue Schedule F order for stripping civil service protections. He said he then moved to fire rogue bureaucrats, including those who weaponized our justice system and the warmongers and the America Last globalists in the deep state, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the National Security Industrial Complex. Trump has also pledged to terminate the Education Department and wants to curtail the independence of regulatory agencies like the Federal Communications Commission. Yes, and are these supposed to be bad things, corporate press? Are these supposed to be bad things? I would love to know that, because that sounds like a wet dream to me, to get rid of some federal bureaucracy, to turn down the size of the government. Yeah, the federal government does not need to be nearly as big, nearly as bloated, and nearly in control of what it is. Right? Now, we just had a pretty good Supreme Court ruling come down the pipeline recently, getting rid of Chevron deference, which is basically that these agencies, these federal bureaucratic agencies, get to make up rules, and when they're fought in court, they defer to experts from those same bureaucracies, from those same agencies, to issue a ruling. They defer to those quote-unquote experts who made the rule in the first place. That's like taking yourself to court, investigating yourself, and finding that you did nothing wrong. That's what that is. They got rid of it. Now it comes to a judge to decide if this is a rogue bureaucrat just making up rules to act like laws, to force people under an authoritarian thumb. That's what the Chevron deference broke. They can no longer do that. Now they have to go through a judge to get those through. This is very good news for the federal bureaucracy. This is very good news. Right? We're going to start seeing the results of this. A lot of this Biden administration garbage that has been coming out would have been overturned. Most of it would have been overturned by this. I can almost guarantee you, because a lot of his green policy deals are insane. Just outright insane. But there was more to this story, but as you can see, I'm running kind of long, so I think I'm going to cut it off there. Rambled for long enough, right? Y'all let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. That's all I got for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching, and y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.